Hello, in this video we're going to spend some time walking through one of the formulas for sample standard deviation. Um, in our course, Chapter 3, we spent time focusing on measures of central tendency, which basically takes a look at statistics such as the mean and median, mode, basically statistics to give you an idea about where the center of a set of data lies. Um, the word average can be used. We usually use it in regular language, meaning the mean. But in statistics and mathematics, the word average actually can have multiple different meanings. So you have to be a little specific on what average you're talking about. As far as standard deviation and variance, those are measures of spread or measures of how much the numbers vary. And in Chapter 4, the textbook walks you through methods to find those values in a more computational manner, so that if you had a handheld calculator, it wouldn't be that difficult. What I like to do now is to spend a little time doing two things. Number one, walking you through another formula for this sample standard deviation that gives you a better sense of what's going on when you find that value, I believe. And then also to walk you through how you can do this, some of the tools on Excel that I'm going to demonstrate along the way. All right, so the set of data here in this column of x, that's our variable, there's 5 values right here, 7, 3, 1, 0, and 4, and these are taken from the text table 4.3. That way you can take a look at, from your text, you can see what the value should end up being to compare our work here with that. And what we did here was this. I went through and found the sum of those 5 data points, which was 15. We have a sample size n, which is 5. Now, the Excel does not have a great editing feature. So I typed the words x bar, meaning the mean, or sample mean, and that is the variable x with a bar on top, so just like this. But this is a picture pasted. So whenever you see the terms x bar, that means the mean. If you take a look at this formula down here, this is another formula that our text does not have, does not use for finding the sample standard deviation, but I want to walk you through what's going on here. You'll see inside this square root sign, or this radical bar, the summation symbol. This symbol means you're adding up these values. These values are, if you take each x value, in this case 7, 3, 1, 0, and 4, and one at a time, subtract that number minus the mean, and the mean, or x bar, was 3. So for each one of those differences, again, the x value minus the mean, we're then going to square them, or raise to the second power, and get another value. And then we're going to add those 5 values up to get a sum. That's what this sum means. All right. Our textbook refers to this numerator here with the symbols SS for sum of squares. And it's a good thing to know. So the formula they use here is they use the capital SS in this numerator. And then in the denominator, we're going to divide by one value less than the sample size. And then since the sample size here was 5, we're going to divide by 4. That's going to give us this value under the radical sign here, which is our variance. Then we can take the square root of that value to get the sample standard deviation, or S. And that value here is an important statistic that basically is going to be at the heart of everything we do from the rest of this course. So this is an important statistic to understand where it comes from. And it is a number that represents or gives you a value of the spread of the data. It's sort of a little, on average, how far is each value away from the mean. So, for example, if you were to take a look at these 5 values, and you wanted to get a sense of, on average, how far are these values away from the mean, you would compare each one of these to the value of 3, which was the mean, and get a sense, give or take, about how far those numbers are. So that's what the standard deviation does, and it's used then throughout the course in other things. I'm going to walk you through how you can use Excel to actually complete some of these formulas yourself if you like. Otherwise, and what we've seen in a previous screencast, is you can also use the data analysis tool of descriptive statistics to find these values as well. So for example, I use that descriptive statistics tool in the data analysis tool pack to find these values. And you can see here we have the mean, standard deviation, sample variance, and the sum and the total count, which is the sample size. So I'm going to walk you through how to do that now. So I have a new sheet. In order to do this, what we need to do first is take care of these values. We want to find the mean, or x bar. And the mean, as you recall, is the sum of the values divided by the sample size. So we can either type these up by hand and get a sum, or do them in your head, or what I want to use is the function tool within Excel. So I'm going to click in this cell, double click to get the cursor in there, and I'm going to type the equal sign. And what this does is it now tells me I want to create some type of function. And in this case here, I want to find the sum. And if you noticed, when I did type equals, all of a sudden up here, I got a menu of different functions. So if you wanted to find a quick statistic on any one of these, you can use these values. But in this case, we're going to find the sum. And now this menu comes up and asks you, okay, you want to find the sum of what numbers? So in this case, I want to find from 7 down to 4. It'll format something immediately for you, and in this case, it recognized that the values are above this. But if you have a large set of data and a bunch of columns and rows, you may need to then click and drag these values. And if you want to make sure you're on the right track, you can see here, it's going to give you what that result is before you hit OK. But I'm going to hit OK, and that gives me the sum of 15. A neat feature here moving forward is the fact that you can have these formulas set up, and if you put in data and change data, say for example I want to change the value here of 1 to 2, I can, and you'll notice it changed the sum to 16. All right, but that's an aside. So let's get that back to 1, so we have a sum of 15. The sample size, I'm just going to type in the number 5 here. Again, there's 5 values in the sample. And then I want to find the mean. The mean, again, is the sum divided by the sample size. I'm going to double click in this cell, hit equals, and what I'd like to do right now is to show you how you can, again, create a quick feature or function within Excel. I'm going to click on this cell where the 15 is. I'm not going to type 15 in this case, but I'm going to click in that cell. I'm going to hit the division bar. The division bar is right under the question mark. It's the same key. And I'm going to divide by this value. And hit return. And you'll notice now it gave me a sum of 3. All right. Again, a neat feature of having that formula set up in here is, say for example I went back to the original data and changed this 1 back to 2 again. Not only did it change what the sum was, but it also changed the mean. All right. So let me go back here. All right. Now, the next step is in the formula. We now have the mean. The mean is 3. Sample size n is 5. And what this formula is telling us is for each one of these values, we then have to subtract from it the mean, x minus x bar. So what I'm going to do is, and I set up a column so that I have the x value here equals, and then I'm going to select this cell minus, and again the mean here was 3. I'm going to type in 3 and hit enter. So you'll notice now that gave me the value of 7 minus 3, which is 4. So we now have to do that for each one of these values. So for each one of these differences, I'm going to then square them. But for right now, I want to find these values. I could either go through and do that one at a time, or if you notice when I clicked on this cell on the bottom right corner here, there's a little black square. If I get my cursor over that, you'll notice that my cursor changes from this type of plus sign to a narrow black plus sign. I'm going to click and drag that down for the other 4 numbers. Let go. And when I do, you'll see what it did was it subtracted 3 minus 3, which is 0. 1 minus 3, which is negative 2, and so on. All right, now the next step, once you find those differences, is to then square them. Square those differences. So I'm going to put my cursor in this cell, hit equals, and what I'm doing here is squaring this value. So I'm going to click on this cell, and then to square it, you use the caret symbol above the 6. So I go Shift 6, and then type 2. So I'm raising this value to the second power, which means 4 squared, or 4 times 4, which is 16. I'm going to hit enter, and now I have that value there. And when I click on here, you'll notice up here it shows you what formula was used to find that. I'm going to do the same thing for these. I'm going to click and drag. So now I have, for each one of the x values, I have the square of the difference between that value and the mean, right here. So that's this part of the formula, but I am adding up all 5 of those. That summation symbol means adding them up. So to add these, I'm going to double click in here. I'm going to hit equals, sum, click and drag, and enter. Now I have 30. And so the sum of the squares differences here was 30. So this numerator in this formula is 30. Which if you look in the text, the sum of the squares, or SS, that they have on step 6 is also 30. Now to find the variance, I need to then take this numerator and divide by 1 less than the sample size. Textbook also calls this the degrees of freedom. My sample size is 5. I then need to divide this value by 4. So I'm going to double click in this cell, hit equals. You can either type 30, I'm going to just select the 30 cell there. I'm going to divide it by 4, again, which was 1 less than 5. Hit enter. This is my variance, 7.5. Corresponds also to step 7 in the text. Now I want to find a standard deviation itself. Standard deviation, or sample standard deviation, is the square root of the sum of the squares divided by the degrees of freedom, or the variance here. So now I want to take the square root of this value. I'm going to double click in this cell and hit equals. Up here in this space, I'm going to click and get my cursor in there, and it remember now I need to find the square root. To find the square root, you can start typing SQ, and you'll notice it's going to give you options of functions that started with SQ. SQRT is the symbol, or the short form, for square root. So I'm going to finish typing SQRT, and then in parentheses, actually right now I can just click on this. Pardon me, I made an error there. Get the parentheses symbol in there. Click into 7.5, which is saying it's taking the square root of this cell, and enter. And I get this at 2.74. Okay, that is the standard deviation. I wanted to walk you through that to